everyone. Hope all of you are doing super well. And in this video, I'll be giving you some information on defining the change strategy as part of strategy analysis. So, this is our last knowledge area as part of strategy analysis. And if you want to get to know more about strategy analysis, I've taken a couple of videos. I'll add them to the description box. So, without any delay, let's get into it. So why do we need to define a change strategy? Okay, the main purpose of defining a change strategy is to develop and assess all the alternative approaches to the change and then select and recommend a particular approach. So there might be different strategies to a particular change. You want to assess all those strategies and then recommend and come up with the right one. So, as part of the change strategy, it needs to clearly describe the nature of this change that you're going to make in terms of the context of the change, identified what are all the identified alternative change strategies. You need to justify for why a particular change strategy was being selected and why is it the best approach. Next one is you need to identify and provide information on the investment and resources required to work towards the future state. Only then planning can be done effectively. Next one, you need to mention how the enterprise will realize the value after the solution is delivered. And also, you need to check the key stakeholders who will be part of the change and also the different transition states that are going to come along the way of that change. So, all this information needs to be mentioned whenever you define a change strategy. And defining a change strategy is more simpler when you have the current and the future states. So I've taken a video on how you define current and future states. So the links are in the description box. You can take a look at them. So in the BA-BOK guide, all this information is taken from the BA-BOK guide. So defining a change strategy, you need information. What are all the inputs you need? You first need to understand what is the current state, what is the future state. Are there any risks that are involved? These three informations are all knowledge areas as part of the strategy analysis, change strategy. And these videos, how do you define each, I've taken, it's in the description box. Apart from this, you need to even understand and take into consideration the stakeholder engagement approach, because you need to even collaborate with stakeholders. So you need to understand what is the approach. There are also certain guidelines and tools that would help you define the change strategy. One is the business analysis approach. I've already taken a video on that. You need to consider all the design options as well as all the solution recommendations. Taking into account all these, you would be able to define the change strategy. And as part of this output, you will come up with the change strategy as well as you'll be defining the solution scope. So with this in mind, first one is the solution scope. So you need to define and describe the boundaries of the solution, okay? And it is described in enough detail to enable stakeholders to understand which new capabilities the change will deliver, okay? The scope needs to be in detail. You just can't give a very high level scope, okay? The scope needs to be in detail. Only then stakeholders will understand what are all those new capabilities, what is the value this change is going to deliver. So there could be multiple solution options that needs to be evaluated, and as part of the change strategy, only the best solution approach which is justified will be selected. Okay? So the solution scope might be described in different ways, but make sure that you include and use all these dimensions, which is you need to mention as part of the solution scope what are the capabilities, the technology, business rules, the business decisions that were taken, data, processes, resources, knowledge and skills, the models and descriptions of the markets, functions, locations, networks, organization structures, workflows, event sequence, motivations of the business logics. All this needs to be utilized when you mention the solution scope. Only then I hope you start to see how well the solution scope would be detailed enough so that you know what exactly is being done and delivered as part of the change. The next one is gap analysis. So to define a change strategy, you first need to know where you want to start and where you want to end. Then only you can provide some solution to it. So that's where gap analysis is performed. You need to have the the future state, as well as you need to understand what is the current state and also the transition states. So to perform gap analysis, both are required, and the capabilities analyzed in the gap analysis can include the processes, functions, lines of business, again organization structure, locations, data, the information, staff competencies, knowledge and skills. This could also be a gap, and trainings, facilities, application systems, and technology infrastructure. Some of the areas in which you would perform gap analysis to see where and all the gaps exist. Okay, so the gaps need to be addressed in the transition and the future states. You just cannot be without addressing those gaps, because they are going to still be gaps and create more chaos. The next one is enterprise readiness assessment. So this is interesting. You also want to understand and assess to see if the enterprise is not only capable to make the change and ready to make the change, but you also want to assess and see whether the enterprise is capable of sustaining that solution and realizing the value from the solution. So it's not only necessary that you make a change, that change needs to still be sustainable, right? So you need to check the readiness of how well are we prepared to make the change as well as to sustain that change. So you need to consider factors such as the cultural readiness first of the stakeholders and the operational readiness in making that change. Then you need to check on whether the timeline for when that change is going to be implemented to when value will be realized. Are we ready with that timeline, with that period, and with that period of waiting to realize the value? And the next one is the resources available to support the change effort. Are we ready to go ahead with that change given all the resource availabilities that we have at hand? The next one is the change strategy. So the change strategy, it is a high level plan of the key activities and events that will be used to transform the enterprise from the current state to the future state. Okay. So the preferred change strategy should be selected. How do you select which is the right change strategy? You need to consider the organization's the readiness to make that particular change, the major costs and investments needed to make that change, the timeline to make the change, alignment to the business objectives, the timelines to value realization, and opportunity costs of the change strategy. Okay, so you need to understand all these dimensions. You need to consider all these dimensions when you're selecting the right change strategy. It needs to be optimal in all possible ways. Usually, businesses will see the fastest way to get that change done at lower cost with minimum resources, but getting the utmost value and of great quality. Some of things that are considered. So you even need to check on when we talk about opportunity costs. So you need to check on the need to consider the ROI. It's very important to consider the ROI because you're investing something. And when you're investing, if the returns are going to be very low and negative value, then it's not much of a big benefit for the enterprise. So you also need to consider ROI when planning to take up a change. And last one is measure the current versus the potential value. So use of metrics again, when you measure what the current state is, when you have that quantitative data with you, you would be able to measure and see how far this change is helping the organization to increase its either revenue or the performance or quality or whatever. But it's very important if you start measuring these values. And the last one is transition states and release planning. So, one thing to keep in mind is that when you make a change, it's not going to be just one shot. You implement that change and boom, it's implemented. No. The change could also be, when you want to achieve that future state, it could be a accumulation, or it could be consisting of multiple changes that need to be done to achieve that future state. So in that case, we need to do planning, right? So it's very important to do this release planning. So business analysts again come into the picture and facilitate the release planning, considering the overall budget, the deadlines or the time constraints, the resource constraints, the training schedules, ability to the business to absorb the changes within a defined time frame, and the organization's restraints or policies that may be adhered to in an implementation. Taking all this into consideration, we, the business analysts, will facilitate the release planning. And why do we do this release planning? Is the planning should enable the enterprise to achieve that future state without much of disruption to the business activities. Disruption should be as minimal as possible, or there shouldn't even be disruptions. So that's the main aim of planning release as well, so that there's no chaos in between. So I hope you got some information on how do you define this change strategy. And if you found this helpful, please do give this video a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, please do subscribe to this channel, and also do share your feedbacks. Thank you.